Good afternoon. I hope everyone had a good lunch. We'll get dessert at the afternoon break. Again, my name's Dan Nicky. I'm your host today, and we are at the breakout for how to solve the EV challenge. That might be a little lofty goal, but at least we can discuss it. And we have a great panel. We have Stu Anderson, Director of Transportation Development for Iowa Department of Transportation. We have, at the end, Dr. Kimber, Ph.D., Director of Electric Power Research Center at Iowa State University. We have Joel Zook, Energy Services Coordinator for the City of Ames, and Matt Ott, with Senior Project Manager for MidAmerican Energy. All their bios are on the website, so I'm not going to waste time going into all the great things you've done. They can look them up if they wish. How we're going to work today is the same way hopefully your morning session went. Each panelist will have up to and no more than 10 minutes to give an overview of their thoughts on the topic. Some have slides, some don't. We are recording this event, so be careful what you're saying. And I'm just kidding. The recording is just for people, because we always hear when we have breakout sessions, you know, we sometimes get, oh, you had all these great sessions, I couldn't choose which one to go to. These are going to be posted at the end of the conference on our website, so people can look if they want for something they missed. It's not going to be the highest quality, but it was what was in the budget to doing video. So hopefully that'll work out. So then after the presentations, we will open it to the crowd for questions. And again, we want this to be a discussion, so please ask questions. And we had a lot of discussion this morning with the keynote. Hopefully we can have some good discussions here as well. And to get started, Anne is going to be the first one up. Let me get her presentation. Does that look right, Ann?
Nope.
Nope.
Not yet.
Okay.
Here we go.
If you just want to get started, you can.
All right, so I'm Ann Kimber. I'm the director of the Electric Power Research Center at Iowa State. We are in our 60th year this year. We got a grant from the Iowa Energy Center last year to look at EV charging impacts on distribution grids in Iowa. And I put this up here because I work with a bunch of power system engineers, so we're used to simulating distribution grids and how they operate. And we've been fortunate enough to get smart meter data from some of our longtime utility partners, and we've been able to look at that residential smart meter data and how residential use contributes to summer peak. So that's been a really cool project, and this grant kind of came out of the idea of, we've got a really good distribution system model for one of our utilities. What if you rained down EVs on that distribution system on the worst day of the year? What would happen? And that was a really simplistic, kind of not very sophisticated, I could say dumb, way of trying to look at this. Because actually trying to figure out EV impacts on distribution grids is really hard. And it's not just me who thinks this. There's going to be a lumpy transition of EV adoption based on the availability of vehicles, and then and when people buy them, and people hold on to their vehicles. I think the average age of a car in Iowa is like 12 years. I looked this up on the internet, so I
know. So it must be right.
So it must be right. So there's going to be lumpy adoptions, and it's not going to be even and uniform over a distribution grid. It's going to be in certain neighborhoods. Certain people are going to buy a bunch of them because they can, and other people aren't going to buy any. So if I was a utility manager, if I was a municipal utility manager trying to figure out how to invest to meet this challenge, I think I would not be sleeping very much at night. So that's where this grant came from, and that was our goal, was to use machine learning, which solves all problems, right? No, it doesn't at all, based on real utility smart meter data. So we're in the middle of this project. I don't have our conclusion is this or that, or just let us give you our machine learning tool and you can do this yourself. We're definitely not there. But we have learned a few things so far. So you can go to the next slide. Somebody can.
Did that go?
No.
Can I try it?
Oh, technology, ain't it great?
Anyway, I only have 2 more slides. It's okay, I can just talk through this.
Okay.
So, what we found is there's a real absence of the kind of pure EV charging data that would be really helpful to understand how on the worst day of the year, a bunch of EVs charging would affect the grid. So I put up here some challenges. Customer charging behavior profiles, when, how long, what's the pure charging profile? That is not simple to understand. Cold weather battery heating is a whole nother issue. And it can be a significant load, especially for fast charging for heavy duty vehicles. You have to heat the batteries before they can accept a charge, because if you don't heat them, you'll do what's called lithium plating and you'll destroy the battery, which nobody wants. So I don't think that that's very well understood, and the reason I say it's not very well understood is because one of our students just published a really good paper on this in IEEE Transactions, which is a good journal. Sizing distribution transformers for neighborhoods with EVs is complicated set of investment decisions. Because the neighborhoods are not all alike. You're gonna have some with 5 Teslas and a riding lawnmower that's all electric. That's happened in Cedar Falls, I think, already. So how are you gonna invest in which neighborhood to upsize your distribution transformers? And let's say you do that, you decide you're gonna buy 20% new distribution transformers. How long is it gonna take you to get them? As you heard from the speaker this morning, this part, it makes sense to me that the supply chain, you could have a delay of 2 years before you could actually get these distribution transformers. And we're not talking specialized, very specialized systems, you're just talking about bigger transformers. So that's a problem. The next thing is we don't know how well we can manage EV charging through rate design. Okay, we can go to that. That's okay, we can leave that there. If we don't know how price responsive EV charging is, we're kind of in a world of hurt. It's a tool that we can use that would really help us manage our overall load profile for residential customers. And I'll stop talking soon, but this is just some pure EV charging data from a utility in Iowa. And I hope you all see the problem here. And I'll just say that those are 16 different customers all through the year. And if you're gonna predict how your residential load profiles are gonna behave, you can't right now. Maybe you can if you have time of use rates that push EV charging till late at night. So it seems to me that that's gonna be a really important tool in your toolbox. And with that, that's kind of my perspective on can we make the EV revolution happen, and Joel will now disagree with everything.
Actually, we're gonna have Stu go next, so I can pull Joel's presentation up. So we'll go after Stu.
So, thank you.
Stu?
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. My name is Stu Anderson. I'm with the Transportation Development Division at the Iowa Department of Transportation, and we are the administrators of the new federal funding program to support the installation of DC fast chargers in the state. So I think the EV challenge that I'm here to address a little bit, or to talk about, is range anxiety. So certainly that is a concern we hear a lot about from users is, do they, of course, estimates are that 80 to 90% of electric vehicle charging happens at your home. So most of your travel demand will be met with home charging. But of course, once you're venturing out of your home area and wanting to do longer distance trips, now you need to have access to chargers, and those chargers need to be in locations that are accessible. They need to be reliable. We certainly hear a lot of concerns with the status of the chargers out in the system right now, and pulling up and them not working. So there needs to be a lot more consistency, reliability, high power of those charger systems. So Once that is out there, that certainly will help a lot with at least the issue of range anxiety. Of course, related to that challenge is that right now, with not a lot of electric vehicles, and I'll talk a little bit more about where we're at in Iowa, there's not a lot of profit margin for developing these fast charging sites in the state. So that's why the federal government stepped in with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and created a new program called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. It's a program actually administered through the Federal Highway Administration, which is why Iowa DOT is administering these funds. With all energy-related activities that we do, which we do more than you might think we would, we partner with Iowa Economic Development Authority. So we've partnered with them through their development of the Iowa Energy Plan. We also administered Volkswagen settlement funds, which also want to support some electric vehicle fast charging infrastructure around the state. We're partnering with them very closely. They have much better expertise and knowledge on more of the energy policy levels, and they have historically worked real closely with utilities and other stakeholders, so we've relied on them heavily as we administer these funds. I guess first to back up a little bit about where we're at on electric vehicles in Iowa right now. As of December, we had about 11,600, I think, electric vehicles registered in the state of Iowa. More than half of those are battery electric vehicles, a little less than half of that plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Most of the growth we're seeing right now is on the battery electric vehicle side, not surprisingly. We are seeing significant growth in those numbers. Just in, I think, the last quarter, January through March, we added another 1,000 to those numbers. So a lot of growth. Certainly that growth was in the electric vehicle side. We did not see that growth in the non-electric vehicle side. Having said that, we have over 4 million registered vehicles in Iowa, so 12,000 vehicles being electric vehicles is a very small percentage of the fleet right now. So, but again, a lot of growth, and certainly as there's more incentives, more affordable electric vehicles, some incentives for used electric vehicles, more models becoming available, we expect those to continue to grow. So that makes it a little bit more important then to start building out this charging infrastructure. The federal government, through this program, is hoping to incentivize and jumpstart this so that you start addressing that range anxiety question up front while this market gets built up, and it will start becoming profitable then for the private sector to fill in that demand. Right now in Iowa, we have 86 DC fast chargers, and so that's going to be the focus of my comments. These are level 3 chargers at 480 volts. Can provide a real meaningful charge in a 20 to 30 minute time frame versus what you can do in your garage or level 2 chargers where you really need to be there for hours to get a meaningful charge. Of those 86, I think 16 of those are Tesla chargers. So that leaves 70 chargers that are more of the non-proprietary charging infrastructure out there. Those are not uniform across the state. They do not have consistent reliability or power levels. So that's, again, a little bit of what's trying to be fixed with this new program. One of the reasons this new program will try to address that is it is requiring states to build out their alternative fuel corridors first, which in Iowa is basically our interstate system. It's Interstate 80, 35, 29, and 380. And build out that system in a real uniform manner, so at least every 50 miles is a build out on that system, and with uniform standards. So each site has to have at least 4 ports at 150 kilowatts, and those 4 ports need to be operational and have uptime of I think it's 99.4% or greater. So it'll provide uniformity, high level of service, good level of power, at least on the interstate in the initial investment. We have $50 million over 5 years to invest in this system. We're already in the 2nd year of the infrastructure bill, so we have about $20 million available right now. We are working on developing this program, hope to have the first round of applications solicited this summer. We think in a round or two we will at least award funds to build out the interstate system. And then we can start looking at putting these funds to chargers on other corridors across the state. I was very careful to say we'll have funds awarded to build out the interstate. As Ann alluded to, there are supply chain challenges. We have all 50 states rushing to award a lot of money for charging infrastructure that has Buy America requirements and may require utility investments that will have Buy America requirements. So even though we hope to award these this year, it still may be another year or two before we start seeing real work happen. But again, this is an important first step, and we're pretty excited to move forward with it. I will say it's taking us a little longer to get to a rollout of applications just because you know, the federal highway funds are kind of set up to pour concrete and build bridges and not buy charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of work happening in all 50 states, and how do we roll these funds out in a way that meets the federal requirements using highway dollars. So we appreciate the patience of a lot of people. We're trying to do this right, but hopefully this summer we'll roll out our first round.
Joel, I'm gonna pull up your PowerPoint here.
Yeah, I'm Joel Zook. I'm the Energy Services Coordinator for City of Ames Municipal Electric Service, and so do a lot of things there. Handle our energy efficiency programs and some of our renewable energy procurement, and I handle our EV charging fleet as well. The City of Ames has one DC fast charger that it owns and operates in town, and somewhere between 5 and 8 level 2 chargers. It just depends on when the construction status of the 3 that we're putting in right now are. So I put together some slides. You know, the topic of this is how to solve the EV challenge. I wanted to make sure that we all were having our eyes on the opportunity that this challenge presents to us as well. So I'm a little bit going to be counterpoint to Ann here, a bright ray of sunshine. And I know that there's very real possibilities that we need to deal with at the same time, but I think that, you know, one of the things that we need to think about are the benefits that EVs can bring as well. So I just throw this out here that EVs are a triple win for both our customers and for the planet, and they can be for utilities as well, as long as we're careful with how we're planning these things, making sure that we're getting ahead of them. And just Ann alluded to this as well, is that when that charging happens is going to be really important. So this is an older study from Consumers Report, but you know, they still keep linking new articles to this original report from 2020, just talking about how EVs will save a typical driver $6,000 to $10,000 over the life of the vehicle. So that's looking at basically cost of ownership over 10 years. A huge savings there. Most of that is fuel savings, but they're, you know, projecting lower maintenance costs for those vehicles as well. That offsets some of the higher front cost of the initial purchasing. They threw some tax credits in there as well, so you can see that, and I think this will improve over time as the cost premium for the upfront cost between EVs and other vehicles is going to decrease as battery prices come down, hopefully. So that's a great thing for your consumers, you know, and the great thing about you selling them electricity rather than them going to the gas station is that's good load growth for you, if you're, at least you can. I like this study as well. Union of Concerned Scientists does a review of this every year. This is just a graph that they showed. What is the pollution impacts of driving an electric vehicle? And if you compared that to a car, what would the miles per gallon be on that car? So you can see we've got some cleaner grid pieces on the coast, maybe not as clean as in the middle country. But this is actually data from 2009, so we can look at the same piece because they've been doing this for a long time. This is the same map from 2015. You can see that things are getting cleaner. So this is an odd thing that you would expect maybe a gasoline or a diesel vehicle to increase its emissions over time as it's not firing on exactly how it was built, and as sludge builds up in the engine. And, you know, whenever things get old, they don't work the same way they do at the piece. But electric vehicles, I'm sure you're going to have that degradation as well, especially in the batteries. But the point is that the fuel, the electricity going into that, is getting cleaner over time. So, and again, here's the latest one. I think this is from 2018. You can see almost all of the country is basically getting over 50 miles per gallon, which is, I don't know, comparable to one of the best cars on the market there in terms of fuel economy. A Prius is getting close to about 50. So a lot of people, and I get a lot of questions from this from customers as well. Is driving my EV really cleaner if we've got coal in the mix? And so, you know, on average with the grid mix that we have right now, it's pretty confident to say that anywhere in the country, driving an EV is producing less of an emission standpoint from that vehicle itself. And just to another graphic to show that same point. In about 2016, there was a crossover between the electric power sector and transportation as the largest greenhouse gas sector in the United States. And so you can see that as electricity is going to continue to drop with more wind, less coal on the grid, transportation has really stayed flat, but we're looking at an opportunity of being able to green our electricity and green our transportation fuels as well. And then my last slide here, I say this is a win for the utility. I put an asterisk there, sort of my wink at everything else that we've discussed today. So that's pending. Obviously the timing and the level of the charging is going to be very important. And so we don't want a huge amount of EVs charging at system peak. And so looking at it from, at least from an Ames perspective, we see that on our summer peak, we're seeing a summer peak. We're a small utility. We have about 29,000 customers serving most of the city of Ames. Our summer peak, just for reference, is about 130 megawatts. So even on that hottest day though, you know, about 12 hours off of our peak, we're seeing a trough, which is about 50 megawatts lower. So we still, even on the hottest day, have a lot of room in our existing infrastructure to add EV charging to the mix, so long as it's done at that right time. And so we're moving forward with, slowly, but with adopting advanced metering infrastructure that will allow us to offer time of use rates to our customers, so that we're shifting that load off into the evening time. You know, most charging already is done at home, and so we have a fleet of commercial chargers as well as a fast charger on the interstate for our guests that come through town. But we want to see that load growth at night, and we're looking at this from, obviously there will be needed distribution upgrades, but we're looking at how can we double our electric sales from our residential sector, which is obviously is a huge opportunity for us to be thinking about. How are we going to solve a lot of those problems that come with the needed infrastructure we're going to do? Well, we're going to get money to do it from doubling our sales. So lots of charging does happen at night already, because people are plugging in when they're getting home, and I think it's fairly easy to send a market signal to let people know that they really need to be charging at night on the off-peak rates. And then just another quick fact here that, you know, simply a charging at night with a level 2 charger can provide about 50 miles of charging, which is plenty of mileage for most people's commutes. So, and then we rely on NEVI-funded level 3 chargers to get us around places more around the interstate. So, looking forward to having a more conversation with you folks later.
All right, Joel, thank you. Matt? No.
Yeah, thank you. Matt Ott, MidAmerican Energy. We're Joel. I wear a couple different hats for the company. In addition to kind of managing our EV program, I also help develop our wind and solar projects as well. So a couple different responsibilities, but obviously here. Oh,
I apologize. My computer is having a little difficulty right now, so you may have to wing it.
We'll just wing it. All right, no, not a problem. All right. I was going to touch on this on my first slide, just kind of overview of MidAmerican. Probably most of you guys are familiar with MidAmerican, but we are the largest utility in the state. Over time, our generation profiles have changed. Our generating capacity has changed from coal heavy to heavy renewables. So it kind of goes to speak to you know where the source is for these vehicles.
So, there it is. Anyway, so you can see in 2000, 22 years ago, 70% of our capacity was coal. Now that's significantly changed to wind and solar. If you're an Iowa or MidAmerican customer, through our Green Advantage program, a couple years ago, what our certified number was, 88.5%, I believe, of your electricity was basically offset by renewable generation that we created. So something we're proud of. I think really plays into electric vehicles as there is a push to reduce emissions. As you saw, transportation is that leading industry or sector. So it's a big ability to take a large, bite out of emissions, I guess, is looking at the transportation industry. We are a Berkshire Hathaway energy company, so in addition to MidAmerican, we have a bunch of different sister companies that may get talked about in some of the other sessions today. So just really highlighting that we are kind of a, we're global because it goes up into Canada and England as well. So when I got this, the question was, how do we solve the EV challenge? I responded to Dan, I said, what challenge are we trying to solve? Like, what does that mean? Because
pick one.
Yeah, there is, and here are probably some of the very high level, major ones is, just so many different things as we start transitioning. Because I think the big thing is people kind of have this expectation that if I'm going to transition my traditional fuel vehicle to an electric vehicle, I want that similar experience, right? There's going to be a transition and you're probably going to have to learn, but you want a similar experience from a fueling, pricing standpoint, usability, right? You want to be able to go out and use it much like you would anywhere, your regular vehicle. So when you want to go on a road trip, you don't want to be hampered by the fact that you can't find a charging station or the range is so small. So there's a lot of different things to look at. I'm going to try to take a stab at a couple different things that we've looked at and things to consider. The first is our fast charging program. So a couple years ago, we started the first in Iowa program where we're deploying fast charging level 3, if you will, throughout our service territory as a way to provide energy to our customers and customers, people that may be traveling through our service territory. Over the years, we've put in 41 different sites with plans to build out up to 50 sites over this year and next. Our focus was multiple. It's not just the major travel corridors that most people are traveling through, but it's also to look at the rural or underserved communities, because you're not just going outside of Iowa or to Des Moines. You're going to early Iowa, or you're going to Carroll, right? You're kind of getting different ways. And as a traveler, you don't want to be hamstrung to just the interstate systems, or you're going to visit your relative that's not on the interstate. So we want to look at kind of the full service territory and the full scope of travel throughout Iowa. So that's why you see so many dots across Iowa. Try to stay around 50 miles apart from each other, just to kind of break that up, but give you certainty that you have a place to charge as you travel through. Our charging capacity does change, as Stu kind of mentioned. There's a wide variety of charging capacity throughout Iowa, but I also think that speaks to different places that you might charge, right? If you stop at a gas station, you may probably want a higher charging capacity than maybe you would if you're going to at a destination or someplace you're going to be for a couple hours. It probably doesn't make sense to put high capacity at something that you're going to be there for 3 hours. Cost being one of them, and just usability. So we kind of looked at and broke that out. As going that smaller charger, we're able to deploy more chargers just because of the cost that once you get up to that 150 and above. So that is one thing we looked at, and the charging connectors. Now that this has kind of changed over time since we started, the federal government's really looked at the CCS as the kind of the standard, and essentially that is the default industry standard anymore. CHAdeMO is really more or less obsolete. There's some legacy vehicles that are still going to be out there because 12 years, so you still have to kind of service them and fuel them. So we wanted to look at that. And a couple of years ago, Tesla's they had an adapter, but that was only the CHAdeMO. They didn't have the CCS that they have available today. So we do have both ports, and we'll continue to do that as we deploy the rest of ours. So beyond that, price was one of the, issues, right? So we could control only so much of the price aspect, right? With traditionally, you'll see electric vehicle being more costly than a standard traditional vehicle. Now, when the F-150 first came out with their Lightning model, they were actually fairly competitive actually with price. Now, Ford's increased that price over the last couple of years, but it was pretty competitive. One of the things that we can control and help make it competitive as far as electric vehicle versus traditional is making sure our rates are low for our customers and that they're stable and reliable. So kind of just looking at an example, using the truck as an example because it's, I guess a lot of people would probably look at Iowa being more of a truck, kind of a, SUV, kind of a larger light duty vehicle. So looking at gas at $3.40 and $12,000 miles annually, what would that payback period be? And not considering any of the federal tax credits that you could apply to the purchase of the vehicle. So, that's 6.5 years to realize those fuel savings. If gas jumps up, it's a lot easier to realize those savings if you're driving more, obviously. If you go to a different vehicle type and it's more fuel efficient, you might realize those savings a little more. Or if the price, as you said, batteries and vehicles become more on par with traditional vehicles, that payback period is going to change. But until that actually happens, keeping our rates low helps that payback period. And then as you're alluding to, the maintenance piece of it, no oil changes if it's a full battery electric vehicle, or brake pads, things of that nature. So you're looking at less than 5 years for that payback period. And then, and kind of just looking at a cost per mile, which are really kind of that total cost of ownership. It's depending on what rate you're on. For MidAmerican anyway, our residential rates, it's can be 5 times more expensive for a traditional fuel vehicle versus fueling with electric fuel.
Is it true that due to safety reasons they are no longer producing the Ford Lightnings?
I believe there was a pause on that, and then they've resumed.
They have resumed?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, but as more vehicles come out, it's harder to stay on top of all these vehicles and what's going on. But I do recall there was a stoppage in production until they figured out some issues. But to my knowledge, that's back. This kind of break-even analysis. A couple years ago, somebody asked what that break-even point is, as far as what gas would have to be on par with electricity on a cost per mile basis. And again, using the truck as an example, because efficiencies change with the vehicle type. So, gas would have to be under our rate RS, our standard rate or electric rate for our residential customers that majority are on. Gas would have to be $1 to break even on a cost per mile basis. If you're on our RST rate, which is our time of use rate, and you're charging your vehicle off peak overnight, gas would have to be 75 cents. So it's been a long time since that's the case, and as you can see, it's probably not gonna happen again. Hopefully, even COVID with that reduced impact to travel and demand, you can see we're still far below that. And then just looking at it on a fuel cost standpoint, as you can see, again, gas continues that upward trend. For electricity, it's pretty stable. 9 cents back in 1996. We had a rate case in 2015, and now we're at 11 cents. So it's pretty low, pretty stable. So that helps our customers, helps fleets, especially with commercial operators that can easily forecast fuel demands versus not knowing what the price of gas was going to be next week or at the end of the year. Touching on grid capacity, and this is going to be a kind of a back way to get into it. Really speak to Stu's point of the growth that we're expected to see, right? So Iowa's market share of new vehicles, it is on an upward trajectory, but it's behind the U.S. as a whole. So there is a gap, and it's probably not a huge surprise that Iowa lags. I think 2022, 40% of EVs were sold in California. So, you know, there's different markets where we're gonna see that growth. And so Iowa is on that upward trajectory, but, you know, it still lags the US as a whole. Even if we want to, you know, the federal government has a goal of 50% of new vehicles,
By 2030.
2030 exactly, being EVs, right? Optimistic goal, I think. A lot of things are gonna probably go into that. A lot of variables. We now have the tax credits that are going to be available. EV charging infrastructure will be rolling out to help reduce range anxiety. You know, if fuel prices go up, manufacturers, if they, you know, need to meet EPA requirements, things like that, right? So maybe they'll push up the rollout of EVs, things like that. So it's really hard to judge. I think Iowa's still gonna lag. I don't know if we're gonna necessarily meet that 50%, or maybe it's gonna come right at the end. But it's gonna be trailing, right? So even 50%, it's gonna be still a small percentage of the total vehicles out there, a small impact to our total load. That's not to say that we don't need to manage that and that, you know, we shouldn't be concerned about that. I think it's just, there's this concern that tomorrow that if 50% of the vehicles were electric, it was just gonna ruin our system, right? And we're not prepared, but it's probably not realistic to make that expectation. I think, go ahead.
That actually goes to my first question I had, and then we're gonna open it up to the audience for everyone to participate. But my first question was, and I want everybody to comment on this if you can, or would like to, is how are we gonna meet that presidential goal? What does Iowa need to do? Does it say 50% by 2030?
Well, you're going to have to somehow Iowa's gonna have to encourage a lot more EV ownership, right? And so what incentives are there for, when you can't even buy the models of cars that actually have the tax incentive available to them now? So we're gonna be lagging behind that as well. I think, you know, do the utilities themselves provide more incentives for installing EV charging equipment at your home, bigger rebates for that, and how do they do that cost benefit analysis? You wanna grow your electric sales, there is a value to the utility, but are the utilities prepared to do that?
Stu, we gonna have the chargers by 2030?
Yeah, you know, I don't have a good sense of what actually is needed to meet that demand on the system. I do think this program that we're administering is gonna be a great jumpstart in getting at least that base level build out there. You know, I mentioned, we think after a round or two, we'll be able to build out on the interstate, and then, you know, we're gonna have a couple more years of funding available to start hitting other corridors. And again, as we get more electric vehicles in there, there'll be more profit margin and incentives for the private sector to follow. So it feels like, at least on the charging infrastructure, we're the right direction. You know, that, again, most charging happens at home, so we don't need to see a charging infrastructure every place we see a gas station today.
Well, I was at a conference in Minnesota 2 weeks ago, and it was convenience stores, and they had a whole track, that's why I attended them, how they're going to be dealing with EVs. And it's on the convenience stores' radar. I mean, everything from the design to profitability, because there's studies out there that says, because again, as we mentioned, most EV owners are, you know, driving the Tesla or upper economic status. And there was a study that most EV people will sit in their cars and watch Netflix versus going in and buying a soda and a beef stick. You know, so what about how the city's gonna handle 50% of the cars being EV?
Well, 50% of the new cars being EVs, right? So I mean, like, as Matt said, we're not gonna flip our fingers and overnight have 50% of the cars in our service territory be EVs. It's gonna happen over time.
Yeah.
You know, I've been at Ames for less than a year, and I've already sort of gone in my thinking of what can we do to encourage EVs, to just how do we make sure that we're ready. And so we do offer level 2 chargers to, you know, encourage our customers to be looking at that. And
Now, to get the charges, do they have to sign up that you have control over when they charge the car? 'Cause I've heard some local utilities, you know.
We don't have the ability to do that yet,
Okay.
although we're certainly looking at that with our advanced metering infrastructure and whether we can have a demand response that goes into that. You know, we're saying right now that they have to be Energy Star certified level 2 chargers, which have some of that built-in timing capability, that the customers can manage themselves at this point. But, you know, beyond that, I mean, we do have our own sort of, public, level 2 chargers and level 3 chargers throughout the city. And one of the things that I'm gonna work on a lot over the coming years to make sure that we're really making this approachable for everybody is that we focus on some workplace charging, as well as we've got a lot of multifamily
Apartments.
housing units in Ames. We're a college town. So we wanna make sure that it's at least a possibility for those college students who are buying their first car to have an EV charger and a place to charge it wherever they're living.
Okay, so now I'd like to open up to the audience for questions for the panel. Anybody like to start the first one?
How many EVs do you think you have on your system? Just level 2 chargers?
Level 2 chargers or vehicles?
Just level 2 at homes.
I don't know. So, at the end of last year, for the last, I think it was 3 years, we provided a rebate for new vehicles. It wasn't for the purchase of chargers, it was vehicles. That was still a steady increase. We ended that last year, but you know, I don't have those. I'm happy to get that number of you know, people buying vehicles. I would say most people that are buying those vehicles need a level 2, especially now as the transition goes to battery electric vehicle, right? So I have a plug-in electric vehicle myself. I do have a level 2, but do I need it? No. You know, I could get by for most instances without having that. But I have a level 2 for those times that I do get home and want to charge and ready to go. So I think we had.
Sorry.
Slide, no, it's gone. I can't remember what our estimate was for the number of customers. Obviously, our service territory covers a lot of the larger metro areas, Des Moines, some where you're seeing the large growth in adoption.
Yes, sir.
So,
Oh, if you could say your name and where you're from.
okay, Don from Ames,
Okay.
and so this is not for Joel. So the question, public chargers have rates anywhere from nothing, they're free, all the way up to 40, maybe even 50 cents a kilowatt hour charging. Maybe it's a question for Stu or even Ann. Is that a good thing to have rates so diversified across the state, or should they be looked at? I'm not saying regulation, but I mean, what are your thoughts on the wide range of electric rates and charging a car publicly?
I'll start and then let Ann jump in. So yeah, certainly there's no regulatory side, and with our funding, there's no regulatory side about the rates, but I think there is a recognition that that's probably not advantageous. That's probably one of the challenges of charging is kind of the wide variety and maybe the lack of publishing or showing what rates are. So there are requirements with these funds that they will need to be kind of shown at the site like we see for gas right now. I think the intent is to, one, for public awareness, but also ultimately to help assure there's some more level playing field and market competition where appropriate, but definitely no regulatory side.
That's a really great question, because you've got so many different kinds of utilities with all these different service territories, with different costs of production, different energy mixes. It probably needs to be some publication, but gosh, I can't see that you could have a standard rate because everyone's costs are so different. It's tough.
Sure.
As we move towards EVs.
Name and, can you say your name?
Steve.
Okay.
From Des Moines. So with the move to electrification, EVs, how does like that gonna impact, like less gas, the tax that we get to use for the infrastructure of the highways and bridges?
This sounds like a Stu question.
Yeah, no, you kind of teed that up for me. So that's a great question, and I do have to give credit to the legislature in Iowa back in 2018. They actually started thinking about that and I guess they told us in legislation, told the DOT to do a study of what those potential impacts are and make some recommendations. So we did that. That was submitted to the legislature by the end of 2018 as required. And a couple months later, they passed a bill that implemented our recommendations. So one of those recommendations is to, and this is the one most states have done in the country, is to add a supplemental vehicle registration fee for electric vehicles. It varies a bit whether it's plug-in hybrid or battery. It phased in over 3 years, so as of January of this year, it's fully phased in now. So that's an extra, it's $130 for battery electric vehicles. You pay that on top of your normal vehicle registration and what you pay the county every year to license your car. So that fee, as I mentioned, that's what most states have done. That's intended to capture in Iowa what is not being paid when you're doing in-home charging versus paying the gas tax. One thing we did in Iowa that's a little unique, although now we're seeing about any state that's taking this on look at this as well. We also recommended in the legislature adopted a per kilowatt hour fee for non-residential charging. So that actually takes effect July 1st of this year. The legislature wanted multiple years before that was implemented, just because it's a brand new user fee and there's some challenges, still challenges with implementing that. But so that's intended to capture out-of-state electric vehicles that are using our system but not paying the supplemental registration fee. But more importantly, that's intended to capture one thing we haven't talked about, that as we start seeing electric powered semi-trucks and buses on the system, they aren't subject to that supplemental registration fee, so they will be subject to the per kilowatt hour fee. So from a road use tax fund perspective, the state road fund for DOT cities and counties, those fees were set up to be revenue neutral, not so that we're getting more money, but so that it's capturing what is not paid by fuel tax. So in Iowa, from a state revenue perspective, it's covered already.
In the back.
Hey, Allison, West Des Moines. I have a couple questions. Stu, for you, are you thinking about how VMT is collected so that we can incorporate EVs into, say, greenhouse gas inventories and things like that going forward to see how that metric is gonna trailing off or continuing on?
Yeah, and certainly we, at the DOT, one of the other requirements in the infrastructure bill is, well, there's a requirement and there's a funding pot. There's a carbon reduction fund that we get, which is more focused probably on alternative modes of transportation, you know, supporting bicycle, walking, public transit, but also can involve in low carbon construction materials. But part of that is we're required, working with all the metro areas in the state, to develop a carbon reduction plan. So certainly as part of that, we'll be looking at some of those inventories and trying to get into that, at least from a transportation perspective.
Sorry?
So Matt, I was wondering if MidAmerican, I know you guys do like energy audits for homes or energy assessments. Is there any consideration on like including what a house would need for retrofitting to bring in an EV charger to say their garage or to the exterior of the home or anything like that? And it's coupling that in?
Yeah, I don't think that's something that we've ever looked at. That's probably really on the customer to understand, you know, work with an electrician. Those, you know, certified or licensed electricians are gonna be much better suited to kind of understand what the, you know, a house would be suited for EV charging. And then working with us, you know, should their service need to be upgraded to support that.
So level 2 requires 220, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
240.
So that's definitely a consideration.
Joel, I guess to you then, is Ames considering any programs or anything like that to increase the amount of at-home charging stations or any pieces like that?
Well, I mean, our rebate for customers for both commercial and residential charging is the obvious response to what we're already doing there. I think it's likely that any program that we would implement would be more of an income qualified focus piece. I think that's one of the things that we're gonna look at in the future, is that as there is going to be availability of lower cost used EVs, there's not a lot out there right now. And so this is, I think maybe premature for us to jump on this yet, but I would like to make sure that we're using our utility office to make sure that that's available to folks. And so we've kicked around some ideas of how we can do some income qualified things with maybe with a focus on including some electrical service upgrades. So nothing official yet.
Yes, sir.
So we've talked a lot about how it's gonna be really important to make sure and like manage when this charging is happening, and how a lot of it happens at home, and we've kind of commented on this, but what kind of projects are being done to address like charging accessibility for people that live in like income qualified or multifamily housing, just the people that don't have like a garage that they can install a charger and plug their car into at night? I don't know, it's kind of a general question.
I can try.
I should have specified.
Our public chargers are just that, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the requirements, that they are accessible for the public to use. So, there are other commercial customers, Hy-Vee, for example, that provide that as a benefit to their customers. And I know a lot of customers, some rely on that charging. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk about that. What the right solution is, that's probably a tough answer to come up with. But I think, for us right now anyway, we do have our public charging available. I know Des Moines has some public charging at parking garages, things like that. So there's opportunities out there. I believe some of the federal funds that are available are looking at Justice 40 or kind of underserved communities as well. Stu, you want to expand on that, or?
Yeah, so certainly with the formula funding we have, they definitely want us to look at, opportunities to put these in underserved areas. We have a little less flexibility because we're also constrained to have them within a mile of interstate corridors. And however, there is along with this formula program where each state gets a fixed dollar amount, they are also have a national discretionary program where communities and jurisdictions can apply for money for charging infrastructure, where there's a lot more flexibility in the level of chargers and where they're located. And that certainly is a priority in the administration at the national level to do that. So I think there's more opportunities through those discretionary programs. They have the first round of that kind of open for solicitations now, but we'll be doing that every year for the next several years. So I know there's communities in Iowa looking at that program as well.
What about the city of Ames? Think the city would ever pass like an ordinance for new construction of apartment complexes that are required to have X amount of chargers?
I'm gonna sidestep that question and tell you something, and then I'm gonna come back to it, I promise. Tell you something that we're doing already. We did revamp our our new home construction rebate program, which is mostly intended for single family homes, but actually a multifamily development is gonna be their very first customer in that, where we're handing out a pretty sizable rebate for folks. And one of the requirements is that they put an electric vehicle charger in the garage, or at least have a 240 volt outlet.
So the
there
carrot,
in
not the stick.
Carrots are easier.
Yeah.
We have an energy efficiency program that we can do a lot of leveraging through, and carrots are good. Sticks take city council, and that's a whole of city approach, and so we're doing what we can there. So and we'll need to look really hard as to whether or not we want to expand that new construction program so that we have something more specifically for multifamily options as well.
We can take one more quick question if there is one. All right, well, that being said, I think we thank our great panel for a great discussion today.